Tonight, I'm sharing 4 disturbing things people found while house-sitting. The first story comes from a college student who discovered a locked journal in the nightstand, and by the end, you'll understand why she never snoops in other people's bedrooms again. This account comes from Claire, a junior in college who had picked up a summer gig house-sitting for her professor. It was supposed to be the easiest money she'd ever make. Water the plants, keep an eye on the place, and stay overnight so it didn't look empty. The house itself was old, a narrow 3-story brick home tucked between taller brownstones on a quiet block. Her professor lived there alone, never married, no kids, no pets. Claire had always found him a little odd, brilliant in the classroom, but private in a way that made students lower their voices when he walked past. When he offered her the job, she said yes before thinking twice. The first few days went exactly as expected. The plants were simple to care for, the fridge was stocked, and she spent evenings stretched out on the couch with Netflix, reveling in how quiet the house was compared to her noisy off-campus apartment. It was the third night when she noticed the journal. She had gone upstairs to the guest bedroom, one of 2 on the second floor. The room was neatly made, with a quilt folded at the foot of the bed, a small desk in the corner, and a nightstand with a lamp and a drawer. She opened the drawer looking for an outlet to plug in her phone charger. Inside, pushed toward the back, was a small black leather-bound book with a brass lock on the side. It was nothing fancy, but something about the lock caught her attention. It wasn't the kind of journal you left lying around unless you didn't want anyone reading it. Curiosity itched. She picked it up, felt the weight of it in her hands. The leather was worn, soft, the corners bent. The lock was the simple kind that clicked shut with a key. Nothing like a safe, more like something you'd buy as a teenager. Still, it felt out of place. She set it back down and told herself it wasn't her business, but when she turned out the light, she couldn't stop thinking about it. The next morning, she found herself Googling how to pick a lock like that. A paperclip and patience, one tutorial said. Another suggested a hairpin. She rolled her eyes at herself, but when she went back upstairs that night, her hands had already stolen a paperclip from the desk drawer. It took only a minute. The lock clicked open so easily that her stomach dropped. She hesitated, the rational part of her brain screaming at her to stop, but then she flipped the cover open. The handwriting was cramped, slanted. At first, the entries seemed ordinary, notes about weather, errands, half-finished ideas for lectures. She skimmed, disappointed. But then, as she flipped further in, the writing shifted. The entries became shorter, repetitive, more focused. July 14. She watered the plants again. She hummed while she did it. July 15. Tonight she left the hall light on. She turned it off at 2:14 a.m. July 16. She opened the kitchen window. She should be more careful. Claire froze. The dates weren't years old. They were last week. She flipped back and forth, scanning faster. The she appeared in nearly every entry. No name, just she. She checked the mirror twice before bed. She plugged in her phone by the lamp. She sleeps facing the door. Her chest went tight. The last entry made her throat close entirely. July 17. She found the journal. That was today. She dropped the book like it burned. The lock swung uselessly on its hinge. Her first thought was that someone was in the house, that her professor or someone else had been writing about her in real time. She bolted into the hallway, checked each room one by one. Empty. She ran downstairs, turned on every light. Nothing. But when she came back up, the journal was gone. The nightstand drawer sat open, empty. Claire didn't sleep. She sat in the guest room with the lamp on, phone clutched in her hand, eyes darting to the shadows in the corners. Every creak of the house made her jump. At 3:12 a.m., she heard it. The unmistakable sound of a drawer sliding shut. from the room across the hall. She didn't go look. She didn't breathe until the sun came up. The next morning, she packed her things and left, texting her professor that she was sick and couldn't finish the job. He never asked why. To this day, she refuses to open drawers in houses that aren't her own. She says she sometimes dreams of the journal, flipping open to new entries written in that same cramped hand. And always, the last line is the same. She found the journal. Before you go, if you found a locked journal while house-sitting, would you open it? Tell me in the comments. Your story might be featured in a future video. Subscribe and ring the bell if you want more disturbing true-style stories. I post new ones every single day. The second story comes from a woman who agreed to stay in her boss's home, only to realize the locked pantry wasn't as empty as she was told. By the end, you'll understand why she never takes house-sitting jobs anymore. This account comes from Mara, 26 at the time, working as an administrative assistant in a law office. She just moved into a small studio apartment, rent eating up most of her paycheck, when her boss, Mrs. Redmond, offered her what sounded like a dream side job. 2 weeks of house-sitting while she and her husband went to Europe. The pay was generous, more than half her rent, and all she had to do was keep an eye on the house, water the plants, and sign for a few packages. The Redmonds' house was a different world compared to Mara's place. A wide, suburban colonial with spotless hardwood floors, expensive rugs, and gleaming appliances that looked more like display models than anything that had seen daily use. Mara felt small in it, like a guest at a museum exhibit. On her first walkthrough, Mrs. Redmond had explained the rules in her brisk, precise way. The cleaning service would come on Tuesdays, the landscapers on Fridays. Mara was welcome to use the kitchen and guest bedroom, but not the master suite. And Mrs. Redmond paused at the pantry door at the back of the kitchen. This door stays locked. Mara frowned at the brass padlock bolted over the double doors. Storage, Mrs. Redmond explained quickly. Old family things. Don't worry about it. Mara nodded, but the lock stuck in her mind. Who padlocked a pantry? The first few days passed quietly. She cooked pasta, lounged on the immaculate leather couch, and watered the ferns. The cleaning service came and went, polite and efficient. The house felt both too big and too still, but she told herself that was just her nerves. It was the fourth night when she first heard it. A faint, shuffling sound, coming from the kitchen. She'd been lying in bed with her phone when it reached her, so soft she thought at first it was her imagination. But when she held her breath, it came again, a subtle scuff, like something dragging lightly across the floor. She crept out of the guest room and down the stairs, heart thudding. The house was dark, except for the glow of the digital clock on the oven. She stood in the doorway, listening. The sound came again, from behind the locked pantry door. Her scalp prickled. She forced a laugh under her breath. Old houses made noises, pipes, expansion, even mice. She went back upstairs, double-checked the lock on her bedroom door, and eventually slept. The next morning, she told herself she'd imagined it. But that night, just after midnight, the noise returned. A soft thump. Then another, closer to the door. Mara sat frozen in bed, staring at the dark ceiling. The third night, there was no pretending. She was in the kitchen getting water when the noise began. 3 steady knocks from behind the pantry door. Her glass nearly slipped from her hand. She stared at the padlock, her throat dry. Knock. 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 The sound was deliberate, not random shifting, not rodents. She backed away slowly, heart racing, and fled upstairs. The next morning she checked the pantry door in daylight, still locked, still the same heavy padlock. She bent close, half expecting to smell something. But there was nothing, just the faint scent of lemon polish from the gleaming kitchen cabinets.
By the sixth night, Mara was unraveling. She jumped at every creak, kept the TV on constantly, and avoided the kitchen after dark. But the noises grew bolder, sometimes shuffling, sometimes tapping, and once, unmistakably, the sound of a sigh, low, tired, pressed against wood. She considered calling Mrs. Redmond overseas, but how could she explain it? Your pantry is breathing? Instead, she texted her best friend, who half joked that she should put her phone under the door and record. The idea nagged at her. So the next night, shaking, she slid her phone across the tiles until it rested against the base of the pantry door. She hit record, backed away, and waited. For 10 minutes, nothing. Just silence, broken by her own unsteady breaths. She reached for the phone, and that's when something tapped against the other side of the door. 3 quick taps, right where the phone rested. She yanked the phone back with a gasp and scrambled upstairs. She didn't check the recording until morning. The audio was faint, but clear. First silence, then a rustling sound, then a low voice whispering something too muffled to make out, and then the sharp triple tap. She nearly deleted it on the spot, terrified to hear more. The last night she spent in the Redmonds' house was the worst. She had barricaded herself in the guest room, suitcase packed, determined to leave in the morning no matter what. But around 2 a.m., she awakened to a sound that made her blood freeze. The pantry door opening. She heard the creak of wood, the soft groan of hinges, and then slow, deliberate footsteps crossing the kitchen floor. She clamped a hand over her mouth, every muscle locked. The footsteps moved past the base of the stairs, paused, then creaked slowly up the first step. And then they stopped. Silence stretched on and on, until she didn't know if she'd imagined it. She stayed awake until dawn, trembling. When she finally went downstairs in daylight, the pantry door was closed again, padlocked, everything exactly as it had been. She left that morning, texted Mrs. Redmond a vague excuse, and never returned. But she couldn't shake the thought of those footsteps, because the guest bedroom, where she'd slept all week, it sat directly above the pantry. Before you go, if you were house-sitting and heard footsteps coming from a locked room, would you stay or leave? Subscribe and ring the bell for more disturbing stories. I post new ones every single day.
The third story comes from a young man who discovered a box of photographs in the attic, and by the end, you'll understand why he never agreed to stay in someone else's home again. This account comes from Adrian, 22, who was house-sitting for a family friend over winter break. He had just graduated college, unsure of his next move, and welcomed the chance to earn some money. The house belonged to his mother's coworker, a widow who traveled often. It was an older home, tucked back from the road, with a steep roofline and dormer windows that gave it a watchful look. On the first day, Adrian carried his duffel bag upstairs to the guest room, noticing how the wood floors flexed and popped beneath his weight. The air smelled faintly of cedar, like closets that had been closed too long. The homeowner had left a note with instructions: water the plants, bring in the mail, keep the thermostat at 68. Straightforward enough. The first 2 nights were uneventful. Adrian spent his evenings scrolling his phone, making easy meals and catching up on shows. But the house felt crowded, despite being empty. Every room had heavy curtains, shelves lined with knickknacks, framed photos of unfamiliar faces staring out. He told himself it was just the way older homes felt, like they still remembered the families that had passed through. On the third night, a draft whistled through the upstairs hallway. Curious, Adrian followed it to a narrow door at the end of the corridor. The door was half hidden behind a wardrobe, as though meant to be forgotten. He pulled it open and found a set of steep stairs leading up into the attic. The attic was larger than he expected. Exposed beams, dusty insulation, and stacks of boxes labeled in thick black marker. A single bare bulb hung from a cord, its glow stretching just far enough to illuminate the center of the room. Adrian sneezed at the musty air and nearly turned back. But one box caught his eye, unmarked, tucked in the corner, the cardboard worn soft at the edges. Inside were photographs. Hundreds of them, loose and curling. Polaroids mostly, the kind that developed into muted colors with white borders. He pulled a stack into the light. The first few seemed ordinary. Interior shots of the house, blurry angles of the living room, the staircase, the kitchen counters. Then, as he flipped through, a pattern emerged. Every photograph showed the house at night, and every photograph included a figure. At first, it was barely noticeable, a shadow in a doorway, a reflection in the glass, but the more he looked, the more deliberate it seemed. A tall figure, always in the same place in each shot, at the edge of the frame, watching. He frowned, unsettled. The photos weren't dated, but the furniture and decor looked the same as now. Even the curtains matched. These weren't old snapshots from decades ago. He kept flipping. The figure grew clearer with each image. Standing at the foot of the stairs, then halfway up, then at the top, closer to the camera's perspective. His chest tightened. The last photo in the stack made his skin crawl. It was the guest bedroom, the very room he was sleeping in. The photo showed the bed, neatly made, with the figure standing just inside the doorway. He shoved the stack back into the box, hands shaking. Maybe they were staged, some weird art project? But who would leave them boxed up in the attic of all places? That night, he locked the bedroom door. He left the lamp on. Still, he couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., the house creaked in its bones, and Adrian heard something soft. A shutter click. He sat up in bed, heart racing. Silence followed. No footsteps, no voices. Just the sound of his own blood in his ears. The next morning, he convinced himself it was his imagination. The memory of the Polaroids had planted the sound in his head. Still, he avoided the attic. He kept to the first floor, scrolling endlessly on his phone, trying not to look at the staircase that seemed to draw his eyes. 2 nights later, he awoke abruptly, his mouth dry. Something was different. The lamp beside the bed was off. He was sure he had left it on. He turned on the flashlight of his phone, sweeping the beam across the room. That's when he saw it. Another Polaroid, sitting on the nightstand. His stomach dropped. He picked it up with trembling fingers. The picture showed him, asleep in bed. The angle was from inside the room, the photo taken just hours ago. He bolted upright, fanning every corner. Empty. The door still locked. He pressed his back against the wall and sat there until sunrise, gripping the photo in his fist. In daylight, the photo looked even worse. The edges were damp, the chemicals still faintly tacky. It hadn't just been left there. It had been taken during the night. That was enough. He packed his bag and left without notice, texting his mother that he wasn't comfortable staying in the house anymore. When the homeowner returned, she called to ask why he had cut the job short. Adrian mumbled something about a family emergency. She accepted it without pressing. But he couldn't shake the image of those photos in the attic, the figure inching closer in each one.
the Polaroid of him sleeping, and the knowledge that the box hadn't been empty when he left it. Someone had been adding to it all along. Before you go, if you found photographs in an attic that showed someone standing closer and closer inside the house, what would you do? Subscribe and ring the bell for more disturbing stories. I post new ones every day.
The final story comes from a woman who agreed to care for a neighbor's home only to discover a bank of security monitors in the study. By the end, you'll understand why she refuses to enter any locked office while house-sitting. This account comes from Danielle, 31, who worked from home as a freelance graphic designer. Her neighbor, Mr. Hale, was a semi-retired businessman, polite but private. He lived alone in a sprawling ranch house at the end of the cul-de-sac. When he asked if she could house-sit while he visited his daughter for 3 weeks, Danielle agreed without hesitation. It seemed simple. Bring in the mail, set out the garbage, keep the house from looking empty. On the day she moved in, Mr. Hale gave her the tour. The place was orderly, almost sterile. No clutter, no photographs, only carefully arranged furniture and neatly labeled cabinets. "You're welcome to use the kitchen and guest room," he said, handing her a ring of keys. "The study stays locked." His voice was firm, almost rehearsed. Danielle didn't question it. People had private offices, sensitive files. She'd keep her distance. The first week passed uneventfully. Danielle answered client emails from the airy guest room, cooked simple meals, and watered the neat line of succulents on the windowsill. At night, she lounged on the sofa and let the silence of the house sink around her. But there was something about that locked study. It was at the far end of the hallway, a heavy oak door with a deadbolt. Each time she passed, she caught herself glancing at the knob. Sometimes, faintly, she thought she heard a low hum behind it, like electronics idling, but she brushed it off. The first odd moment came one evening around 10 p.m. Danielle was washing dishes when she noticed a faint glow down the hall. The study door was shut, but a thin line of light seeped out beneath it. She frowned. She hadn't turned anything on in there. She couldn't. Maybe Mr. Hale had left a lamp on. She crouched down, peering at the crack. The light flickered, steadying, then flickered again, almost like a scream. Her chest tightened. She forced herself to walk away. 2 nights later, she woke at 2 a.m. to a soft clicking sound. She lay still, ears straining. The clicks came in bursts, like a camera shutter firing. She told herself it was the HVAC system, but when she patted down the hall, the sound was unmistakably coming from behind the study door. Click, click, click. Her skin prickled. She pressed her palm to the door. It vibrated faintly, the hum stronger now. She backed away, heart pounding. By morning, the house seemed harmless again, but the memory of that sound stuck with her. The next evening, while taking out the trash, Danielle noticed something strange. In the pile of recycling were Polaroid photo wrappers, several of them, as though someone had been tearing through film packs recently. But Mr. Hale lived alone. Who was using that much film? Her stomach turned cold. By the end of the second week, Danielle couldn't resist anymore. She tried the keys Mr. Hale had left, and one of the smaller brass ones slid smoothly into the study's lock. She hesitated, then turned it. The door opened. Inside, the room was dim, blinds drawn tight. The hum was louder here, unmistakable. Along one wall sat a bank of security monitors, 8 screens stacked 2 by 2. Each screen showed a live feed, grainy black and white. Danielle stepped closer, breath catching. The feeds weren't from outside the house. They were from inside. The living room, the kitchen, the upstairs hallway, the guest room. Her guest room.
The monitors cycled slowly, shifting between angles. In one, she saw herself, sitting on the very sofa she'd been using all week, holding her phone. She looked frozen, her own image delayed by a split second, like the screen was breathing behind her movements. On the desk beneath the monitors sat a stack of Polaroids. She reached for one, hands trembling. The photo showed her, taken from the corner of the guest bedroom, while she slept. Her throat closed. She shuffled through the stack. Each one was her, brushing her teeth, eating at the counter, sitting at her laptop. Dozens of moments, captured from angles she hadn't noticed. Her hands shook so violently, the photo slipped to the floor, fanning out around her. And then, behind her, she heard it. The slow, mechanical whir of a camera adjusting focus. She spun, staring at the ceiling corner above the door. A small black lens gleamed faintly in the dark. It clicked. Danielle bolted, leaving the photos scattered. She locked the study behind her, though the act felt absurd, like locking a door against a storm. That night she couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made her skin crawl. She unplugged lamps, covered mirrors, even draped a towel over the smoke detector, convinced it hit another lens. But the thought that undid her was this. The monitors had shown live feeds. Someone had been watching. And she had no idea if it had been Mr. Hale or someone else. The next morning, she packed her things and left. She texted Mr. Hale a flimsy excuse about an emergency and never returned. Weeks later, she still woke in the middle of the night, certain that a camera lens was hidden somewhere nearby, watching. And sometimes, when she sat too long in front of her laptop, she swore she heard that sound again. Click. 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 Before you go, if you discovered a bank of monitors in a locked study showing live feeds of yourself, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. Your story might be featured in a future video. Subscribe and ring the bell for more disturbing stories. I post new ones every day. Until then, check the corners of your room. Sweet dreams.